let me do a little bit of framing of the idea of coaching. So, I mean, coaching for me is sort of a bit of a kind of approach. And I mean, maybe it's just like the idea that there are things you can learn in coaching that you can apply in any kind of walk of life. So when I say coaching contract, on one side, that could be as a professional coach, you want to create a contract or an agreement with your clients. And that actually comes originally from TA, where Eric Berne noticed that in traditional psychotherapy, the doctor patient, started because Freud was the doctor and his clients were patient. So there was a sense of a sort of hierarchy. But Eric Berne said he wanted to have a sense of equality, adult to adult relationships. So he would create a contract or an agreement, which is a sort of, if you like, adult form of doing business. So there's an idea that when you are a coach, you say to your client, look, your first session you have with a client, you would say, let's set up the agreement, the rules of engagement, if you like. So what I'm trying to do here, as ever, is say two things. Firstly, what is the sort of deal of NLP school? What are the house rules? What are the sort of code of conduct that we expect from you or you could expect from us? And also, if you're a coach, you can use this same material to set up your agreement with your client. Does that make sense? Good. So what's the first thing on the list? Firstly, confidentiality. So, all right, what we did this morning wasn't exactly, you would want to keep confidential. But this afternoon, we're going to do a process where you're going to work in a group of two, and you might want to share some confidential information with the person you're working with. You might want to talk about your nearest and dearest. So you wouldn't like it if they came back in the room and said, so-and-so has got this really, really abusive sister. And I mean, you wouldn't want that, would you? No. So why don't we do a coaching contract as a group? And this includes online, or on Zoomers. Would you all agree to hold confidential that which you hear in your groups of two? Yes. So that's a good thing. Now, all right, now let's move over to the professional side. Now, there are boundaries with this. If you are coaching within an organization, you may say that there are certain things you can't tell me because that'll be a breach of my employment contract. If you're coaching vulnerable people who may harm themselves or others, you may need to breach confidentiality. But I think generally speaking, in NLP training, I haven't come across a situation that one ever needed to break confidentiality. I mean, it's not inconceivable, but it's worth mentioning that. Now, there's also then a whole bunch of ethics of coaching. So just in the way there's ethics in therapy, there's ethics in coaching. And if you'd like a reference, the International Coaching Federation, their website, coachfederation.org, or the European Mentoring and Coaching Confederation, or whatever it is, or company, is a kind of European equivalent. They have a website with copious notes about what is rules of ethics and confidentiality and what you're meant to do and so forth. And, a number of people who've done practitioner have come to me afterwards and said, well, look, I want to actually become a coach. I want to do it as a part-time or something like that, or set up my own business. And I think there is an ethical need. It's complicated sometimes. And I think that you have to be careful. You don't want to go and talk to someone in HR and find out that they're gossiping about you in the pub at the end afterwards, right? So there's how you set up these agreements is important. So that will make sense? Good. All right. Second point, client, coach can say no. So it's also important that you can say no. So if I ask you to come up here for a demonstration, you could say no. And I think it's really important to sense, again, the adult to adult thing, that you feel you can say no. But the also idea is I will say to my client on a contractually designed relationship side, how do you like to be treated? It's an unusual question for people. They often say, that's an interesting question. How do I like to be treated? Well, I don't know. No one's ever asked me that. So it's an interesting idea, isn't it? How do you want to establish a relationship with someone? Again, a contract. Some people might say, challenge me, but be polite. Other people might say, I want you to listen to me and be respectful. So often it's a kind of useful frame. So I would often ask clients, how do they like that? And maybe also, how do they learn? So that's kind of useful. Yes. They might say, I like to take notes, and say, okay, well then at any point, please just pause and say stop for a minute so you can take notes. That can be useful. It can also be a tip for those who are in management. Say, how do you learn? Somebody might say to you, well, I like to stop and take notes. And say, well, then stop me and take notes whenever you like. So it's respectful, but it's also acknowledging, different learning styles. Coach focuses on process rather than content. So that idea of process is the stuff that goes on inside someone's head in terms of, I see a picture, I have certain feelings, I may say certain words to myself. That's a process rather than content, which could be the narrative. Such and such was rude to me at such and such a place. So it's a sort of different idea. So what I say is you don't have such a problem with confidentiality when you focus on process. So if you come back after the thing today, when you've done your coaching, and you say, I work with so-and-so, and when they were talking about somebody, they looked up right, and then they kind of frowned a bit, and I noticed their body tighten up. I don't think that's giving away too much, is it? That side of confidentiality is actually showing that you're kind of focusing on that kind of process side of things. It could be useful for them, but it also means that you're observing it. And again, I don't think you're breaching confidentiality. Do you agree? Okay. So contract to stay silent during demonstrations. So when I'm doing demonstrations, somebody will be sitting here at various times. Would you please not speak or ask questions? If you have a question, make a note and ask afterwards. But the idea is that it's supposed to be like, I'm just with this person. And, if somebody talks, the person here might get a bit sort of like, why is that person talking? Do you see what I mean? It can sort of break the thing, but do ask afterwards. So you'll all agree to that? You'll stay silent during, yeah, thank you. 5, advice-free zone. Well, I think I touched on this earlier. I do like the quote from Oscar Wilde, the best thing to do with good advice is to pass it on. It's never of any use to oneself. So advice is an interesting one because advice is, yeah, of course. I mean, if I go and see a lawyer and they say, sorry, man, I'm not going to give you advice, I wouldn't be happy, right? You're paying quite a lot of money to see this lawyer, you would want advice. In that certain context, you are asking for advice. But on the whole, advice is usually given without being asked for. So somebody, if I come to you and say, look, I've got a problem with my partner and blah, 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 you now can say, well, I'll tell you what I think you should do, right? Now that's advice. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do in all contexts. I mean, you're welcome to do that in any context you like, but not here. Here, you don't offer advice. You ask a question and let the other person give themselves advice. That's interesting in itself. But I mean, let me do a little test. Can I do a little test? How many of you here like to receive unsolicited advice? Show of hands. Not many, not many. Look around the room. Put up your hands if you don't like receiving unsolicited advice. Okay, unsolicited, not just not advice generally, unsolicited, I mean, you didn't ask for it. So I think the general point is everyone likes receiving, no one likes receiving advice, but everyone loves giving it. I love giving advice as well, nothing I like more. Yes, so it's an interesting one, but certainly as a coach or learning to be a coach, it's really important not to offer advice because that's like conversational. You can do that in the tea break or whatever. Very important, just focus. And it's hard. It's really hard. I mean, I say that on the first day. I still see people on day 15, day 20, just like, I can't stop myself. So just track that in yourself. 6, track your state. So, I mean, right. Maybe not today, possibly, but at some point during the training, people tend to get emotional responses. That's part of the reason, isn't it? That you're holding stuff in your body emotionally, things from the past and all the rest, and it'll sort of come out at some point if you do the whole practitioner. Ask the people at the back, did something come up for you all? Yeah, you're all nodding. Yeah, it all came up. So it may not come up today, but if it does, that's okay. Emotions are okay. It's okay to feel things. At the same time, if you feel that you're getting into a really difficult area, you can press pause, say, I don't want to work anymore on this. I need to go and talk to Robbie or one of the resource team. And lastly, is notice when you speak out of the first person. So oftentimes people put up their hand and say, when you find yourself in a difficult situation, do you often find that one kind of sort of thinks of that it could be difficult, let's say, and they're talking about themselves. Let's say somebody was having a problem with their child. You're having a problem with your child? Yes. Okay. Do you get the point? Like, don't bullshit me. You know what I mean? Don't bullshit yourself. If you have something, speak in the first person. When I had a problem, when this happened to me, and this is really useful in coaching. I know when I'm stressed, I will speak in this sort of like convoluted tones. If one was having a problem at some points in one's life and one sensed that there was a bit of an issue there, you know, what a coach would say to me in response to that is, tell me, could you say that as it's happening to me? Okay, I'm having a problem. Tell me more. Well, do you get it? Now, part of it is business and organizations, you know, well, we. Have you ever heard people in organizations speak in the we? I mean, that's some deluded bullshit there, isn't it? What does it mean? Who are we? What happens when you leave the job? Are you still we? What happens when you go home? Are we, you know, we'll have a cup of tea? Imagine if I came up to you and I said, you know what, you know, when you're in a strange situation and you want a cup of tea, but do you want a cup of tea? Do I want a cup of tea? Who wants a cup of tea in this conversation? Does it make sense? It's so on this training, will you, as best you can, I won't tell you off if you don't, put up your hand and say I, where possible. And when you work in groups of two, try and say, you know, I've got this problem with my boss, not if one was having problems with one's boss at work. Do you know what I mean? Because it's kind of bogus, isn't it? I mean, yet we all do it, don't we? Well, I certainly do. Any question on any of that? Yes, we have a hand. We have a microphone.
I have a query. So I want to apply what I'm learning here in terms of coaching as a manager, so I'm a people manager. And there are times where I can explore, we can ask questions and be more discursive and really explore things. But there's times where I need to tell you, you need to do this now. Like I'm just trying to understand like the advice-free zone. If there are situations in which I do need to suggest that, how can I do that differently?
Yeah, I mean, well, this is a coaching contract, not a managerial contract. So, I mean, you know, that's one of the problems with the coach. You know, let's say you're a very kind of sensitive manager and you like psychology and you come on a training like this, you know, best not to go back to work and start psychoanalyzing your staff. I mean, do you know what I mean? I mean, because the key thing that you need to have as a coach or a therapist is not to have an agenda for your client. So if you're managing someone, you have one hell of an agenda because what they do is going to reflect on you. So it's not, it's a dishonest contract to say that I am a coach to my staff. What is an honest contract is say I attempt to manage with a coaching style. But when you need to say, you know, actually, do you mind doing X? You know, it's not advice, it's a command, do X. You could say it politely. Would you mind doing X or please do X?